Good morning, boys and girls. Welcome to a very sunny Thursday morning. I had to close the curtains behind me because the sunrise was so bright this morning. Yesterday we found out that most of the people in San Francisco were heading to Golden Gate Park. And I did look up a little history about Golden Gate Park, and it was a park that was started in the late 1800s, and a lot of people did have to camp there after the earthquake in San Francisco in 1906. The Golden Gate Bridge behind me was not built until the 1930s, so it came about 30 years after the earthquake. And for about 30 years, it was the longest bridge in the entire world. So, few facts that I look up and find interesting also from reading these Magic Treehouse books. So today we're going to read chapter 7 and 8, Magic Treehouse number 24, Earthquake in the Early Morning by Mary Pope Osborne. And Jack and Annie yesterday were given the one last form of writing that they needed to take home, and it was a sign of hope. So let me continue with chapter 7 called Dynamite. "We'd better be careful," said Annie. They stepped in their sock feet over the broken cobblestones, not trying to cut themselves. They headed down the hillside. On their way, they passed policemen carrying stretchers of injured people on them. They passed soldiers directing all those trying to escape the fires. One man was pushing a piano down the street. Another man was wearing a bunch of hats all piled on top of one another. That sounds like the book Caps for Sale. A woman carried her 3 little dogs in a bag. "Everyone's trying to save what's important to them," said Annie. "Like the librarians," said Jack. "And us. We're trying to save this sign." He clutched the piece of wood. When they were halfway down the hill, a soldier on a horse galloped up to them. "Get off the street! We're setting off dynamite!" he shouted. "Dynamite?" said Jack. "Yikes!" said Annie. People started running in all directions. Jack and Annie looked around wildly for a safe place to go. Then Jack saw an alley. "There," he said. They ran into the alley and crouched on the ground. Jack reached into his bag for their research book. He looked in the index for the word dynamite, and he found it. Then he turned to the right page number and started to read. The fact part. After the fire started, the mayor had an idea. He thought that if some buildings were destroyed, the sparks would not fly from one wooden roof to the next. He ordered some buildings to be blown up by dynamite. His plan did not work. The firestorm raged from building to building, from street to street. Firestorm, Jack thought. The word even sounded terrible to him. Just as he put the book away, a huge blast of dynamite shook the ground. Dust and dirt flew everywhere, even down the alley. Jack clutched their sign with one hand. He covered his eyes with the other. Annie did the same. Another huge blast rocked the ground. Jack tasted grit in his mouth. He looked at Annie. She was caked with dust from head to toe. He looked down at himself. He was just as dirty as she was. "Hey! Would you look at those two?" someone said. "Now that's a story." Jack looked up. Betty, the newspaper reporter, and Fred, the photographer, were standing in front of them. Even though they were covered with dirt, Fred was setting up his camera, and Betty was taking notes in her notebook. "Hold up your sign, Sonny," said Betty. Too stunned to say anything, Jack held up the sign with the poem about hope. Fred took a picture. Another dynamite blast shook the ground. "Come with us. We're headed for the park," said Betty. "We can't. We're on our way home to our parents," said Annie. "Well, get along and be careful," said Betty. "Let's beat it out of here, Fred." The photographer grabbed his camera equipment, and the two of them rushed off. "I don't think Betty and Fred recognized us," said Annie. "I don't even recognize us," said Jack. Another blast shook the ground. "Come on," said Annie. "Let's beat it." Jack and Annie jumped up. Jack put their sign in his bag. Then they started back down the hill. Chapter 8. Good Luck, San Francisco. Jack and Annie ran over the cobblestones. Dynamite blasts echoed behind them. They headed back down the hill. Flames shot across the roofs, traveling from one house to another. "We're heading right into the firestorm," Jack shouted over the noise. "We have to keep going," Annie shouted back, "before the treehouse catches fire." At the bottom of the hill, thick smoke was rolling through the street. It made Jack's eyes burn. "Where's the treehouse?" he shouted. "Here," said Annie. Jack followed her voice. She was holding on to the rope ladder. "It's still here," Jack said with relief. "Of course, the treehouse wouldn't leave without us," said Annie. "Don't you?" "Just go, go, go," said Jack. Annie started up the rope ladder. Jack followed. They climbed into the treehouse and looked out the window. All around, buildings were going up in flames. Black smoke seemed to be smothering the city. Jack could scarcely breathe. His throat burned. His eyes were stinging. Annie grabbed their Pennsylvania book. She opened it to the picture of Frog Creek and pointed. "I wish we could go there," she said. "Good luck, San Francisco." "Goodbye, San Francisco," Jack said. The wind started to blow. The treehouse started to spin. It spun faster and faster. Then everything was still. Absolutely still. Chapter 8 was a very short chapter. Chapter 9 will be called The Wonderful Room. And nowadays, boys and girls, Golden State Park is a place where tourists go because it's got beautiful monuments and lakes and lots of activities for people to do. So San Francisco was definitely rebuilt after the earthquake, of 1906, and fires also. So thanks for tuning in. Come back tomorrow for chapters 9 and 10. Have a great day. Thanks. Bye-bye.